Good evening, Bulls fans. This is Matt Gritzmacher with UBBullRun.com. As always, it's 10 o'clock on a weekend, after a weekend. As not always, it's Monday night. John and I both had pretty full Sundays, and apparently John's was so full that he's not able to join me tonight. I'm not quite sure where he is. I assume that he's resting and that he needs that rest. So it's just me for the weekly Olympic Rundown podcast this week. I mean, it's probably going to be shorter than an hour. It almost certainly means that it's going to be a little less in depth, and at times it's going to be a bit more of a hitch as I flip between screens and make sure I'm getting all the information right. Justifiably so. I think a lot of the attention since our last podcast for UB has been on the basketball teams, of course. Men's and women's teams made the NCAA tournament. If I can divert from our usual subject matter for a hot second, it's the first time that a MAC program has swept both basketball titles since 2002 when Kent State did it. And it's the first time that a men's team has repeated as champion since 2002 when Kent State pulled off the repeat. And obviously both competed in their own national championships, first round games, lost both on Thursday and Friday, respectively. I believe that Ohio State, the team that beat the women, lost in their second game. And I know that Miami beat Wichita State on the men's side. Again, outside of our normal talk, but that's certainly the biggest thing. And so you'll be forgiven if you aren't as up to speed on the Olympic sports, which most of you aren't anyway. So if you're watching, you're ahead of the pack anyway. What I think a lot of people don't necessarily know, other than us pumping the heck out of it on Bull Run, is that two of the other winter sports also saw UB at the national championships this weekend. First up, in part because it's just a little bit quicker and shorter, on the swimming and diving side of things, Megan Burns, UB's sophomore freestyle sprinter extraordinaire, who real famously last season went through her entire freshman year without losing a race. At least her sprint races, qualified for nationals in both the 50 and the 100 free. She was UB's first national qualifier since 2013, when Mallory Morell and Brittany Curris both made it. Morell had qualified in 50 free, and that was in the season that she set the school record that Burns beat at the MAC championships. And in 2013, Curris had set the 100 free record at nationals at that meet as well. So really following in some pretty big footsteps for Burns, and she did it as a sophomore. Curris did not make it as a sophomore. Morell, I think, was a JUCO transfer. She came to UB as a junior and only qualified as a senior. The consolation heat, finished in the top 16 of her events. She finished 22nd in the 50 free and 29th in the 100 free. It's so infrequent that we've had someone go to nationals. I don't really know what to say much more about that. Presumably she'll get faster. Just the fact that we had a nationals qualifier for the first time in 2 years is pretty significant. I'm not entirely sure when the last time we had a sophomore at nationals was. I could have looked that up, and obviously I didn't. So that's certainly Burns. That's an end to the swimming and diving season. Heck of a performance there. In both events, really. Neither of her races in the preliminaries were as fast as her times at the MAC championships, but I think to some extent that's to be expected. I think a program like UB, in opposition to someone like Georgia or Stanford or Cal or Texas, is really training for the conference championships, whereas some of the real elite level swimmers in college swimming are probably training for the national championships and targeting their training systems for that week. Whereas Burns was training to peak 2 weeks prior and then had to come in and swim a little bit more. So 22nd and 29th in her two events for Burns, sophomore, real great showing. Would have been great to earn some points, in the national meet, but we still got 2 more years of her, really dominating the MAC there. The other program at the national championships was, of course, wrestling. You can't throw a stone around Bull Run the last couple of weeks without John writing something about wrestling. If you missed it, I don't know how, but they're a young team coming together. The talent's finally starting to get some experience. They sent 3 guys, Joe Ariola, Brian Lantry, and Colt Cotton, to the national championships this year. Really notably, heavyweight Jake Gunning got snubbed from the national championships. Real shame there, because he could have. We all think he could have done some damage there, maybe depending on his seeding. And then Kyle Aikens was a little bit less of a snub, but he was perhaps on the bubble as well. But we got 3 there, which is a big step forward, considering last year the team wasn't even allowed to compete in the postseason because of APR issues from the final season under the previous coach before John Stutzman. All told, none of the 3 won more than a single match, but the wins were pretty awesome. Just to start off, I think Joe Ariola, and John would correct me if I'm wrong, but Joe Ariola in his first round match had perhaps the biggest upset of the entire tournament, really, in upsetting number 5 nationally in the 3 seed of the tournament, Vic Avery from Edinburgh. Beat him in a decision 7-5, just a well-wrestled match. He kind of forced Avery out of his game, wrestled at a different pace, and Avery gave up a bunch of points for getting caught and getting jumpy, and caution points for moving before the ref's whistle, which John could explain better than I could. But that was probably the biggest upset of the whole tournament, and a real shocker for UB, and a solid finish to the season for Ariola, who we were expecting big things from this year. And during the regular season, he definitely struggled a little bit, but he rattled off a few upsets in the MAC championships and continued it at NCAAs. He did get beat by major decision to Willie Miklas of Missouri in conference guy in his second match. And then in his third match in the consolation on the second day, he lost 2-1 with that deciding point coming on a stalling decision. Just real frustrating to see. He was good enough to beat Jeff Kepke from Illinois, and he just didn't. Considering he's only a sophomore, just like Megan Burns, he'll be back for sure next year. Other guy at Nationals who got a win was Colt Cotton. He fell 2-1 in his opening match against Matt Krause from Arizona State. We've talked a couple of times this year about Colt Cotton and how he's at a bit of a disadvantage at 149 pounds, because he sometimes ends up against guys who are 149 with very long and lanky limbs, and he can't wrestle that way. He's a bit more of a stockier fellow. And what Krause did was Krause pretty much just was longer, and Colt had a couple good shots, and Krause is long enough to reach back and grab one of Colt's ankles and keep the UB wrestler from really gaining control there. And that was a frustrating loss, because Krause, like Miklas and like Kepke for Ariola, was ranked top 20 in the country. Cotton can beat anyone if he needs to when he's on, and he was good enough to beat Krause. It was a bit surprising to see Krause not draw a stalling point in that match, or get docked a stalling point, I should say. Colt came out in the second match, his first one in the Wrestlebacks, the consolation bracket, and got a pin of John Fahey from Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, I should say, in just over a minute. Pins are exciting. Doing them in a minute is also exciting. And so even though Colt then lost to the top 10 ranked wrestler from Duke on the second day, he has a highlight. He got a pin at the national championships. The other UB wrestler was at the championships was Brian Lantry. He got in certainly with probably the biggest upset of the MAC tournament in taking on Kent State's Mac McGuire at 133. And McGuire at the time of the upset was ranked number 8 in the country. And so Lantry got in. And he first had to face Cameron Kelly of Ohio from inside the conference, a guy who had beaten Lantry twice this season. And Brian got caught for a bunch of tilt points early in his match and really never recovered. I think he was down 10-0 or 8-0 after the first period and ended up losing 14-0. A good job to avoid the tech fall, but really just something you don't want to think about for too long. And then he ended the championships without a win. He lost 8-3 to Jamal Morris of NC State in his second day, or his second match. That might have been the same day. I don't remember right now. So all in all, 3 guys at not too much difference. Next year it will be at least 4. Wrestling's on the up and up. among the guys who competed this year at the varsity level. Quick tidbit that we saw among guys who are in kind of the red shirt group who have been competing at open levels this year. True freshman Nolan Terrence, who last year was the New York State heavyweight champion in high school before he came to UB, has spent the whole year competing in open championships, and he spent this past weekend, I believe he has dual citizenship, Canadian-American, and he spent the last weekend competing at the Canadian Junior-Senior Championships. And he won the Canadian Championship in Greco-Roman wrestling, which is a bit different than freestyle. There's no holds allowed below the waist, and it's many more throws. But he was pretty dominant in doing it. It took that first place championship, and he's now eligible for the Junior World Championships this summer. I think he also finished second in freestyle wrestling as well, but I don't have that in front of me right now. But if the fact that UB's already fielding a very strong young roster of redshirt freshmen and sophomores doesn't excite you enough, you also need to look to the open guys and the guys who are redshirting, where you see Nolan Terrence winning a Canadian championship a couple weeks ago. Justin Patrick won an open championship, was an All-American there, at 125 pounds. So considering where wrestling was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 guys in the national championships, 2 wins, a Canadian junior national championship, a U.S. Open collegiate championship. Really an exciting spring for wrestling. Track and field opened their outdoor season this week at Wake Forest. Kind of a messy weekend here. I'm in DC, but from the Carolinas up through about Philly and New Jersey, it was a messy, rainy weekend. Not a whole lot of great stuff to report. Malaya White set a school record in her first chance this year at the 100-meter and lowered a couple 60-meter dash school record indoors. That record was one of UB's newest. Tyra Forbes had set it last year at the MAC championships. And so I think that this was the first opportunity for that record to be broken, and White did it. I think that UB hasn't run 100 meters since the MAC championships, unless Forbes ran it at the Eastern Regionals last year, I guess I should say. But another week, another school record for track and field. That's been the story of the last 2 years. Ryan Cribben threw a PR 18.82 meters in the shot put. And I believe I saw a tweet from Phil from the UB athletics department that places him 4th in the country right now. Again, didn't look it up, didn't prepare as well as I could have for this week, so sorry. What else? I think Kamaria Long was the top collegiate finisher in the 400 meters. I'm still interested that she keeps running 400s this year. In the past, she's been a 200 person, and obviously there's not a tremendous difference. Fast people are fast as far as we're concerned, but she's extended out to the 400s, both indoors and outdoors this year, it seems. Alum Chris Reap won the high jump. Laurent Durr came in 4th in that, clearing 6'3". That's real encouraging. I'm really excited about the jumpers across the board for the men this year. I've said that before. One thing to keep an eye on this year is this summer, especially, there are a number of guys redshirting and a few gals redshirting. In particular, that hits UB's mid-distance hard. Both Tyler Sheving and Brian Crimmins are redshirting this year. At least in this weekend, that didn't hurt too much because Craig Kaiser and Tom Meehan finished 2-3 in the 800, and Justin Van Epps also finished top 10. Meehan is a guy that we saw really come on, both in cross-country season and especially in the indoor track season. I'm really excited to see what he does with the rest of his spring here. I think there's a strong parallel to last year on the women's side. Amy Shaw put together a bunch of very strong performances in the long-distance events, the 3,000, 5,000. And Meehan looks like he's really taken a leap forward, and if that carries into cross-country, as it did for Shaw this past year, that could be really exciting to see. The track and field news of the weekend, though, absolutely. Last week, John and I told you about how assistant coach and 1 year removed from student athlete John Jones, UB's shot putter, of course. If you don't know his name, you don't know they won an NCAA championship last year. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you're watching for what might be the first time. And I'm glad that you're here. John Jones, absolute superstar for UB, UB's first ever Division I national champion in any sport. We had 1 or 2 Division III national champions in wrestling. a long time ago. He is still training with UB and Coach Jim Garnham. He's doing a bit of coaching as well. Last week, we were talking about how he finished third at the USATF Indoor National Championships in Portland, Oregon. He stayed in Oregon because his third place finish qualified him for the World Championships, also being held in Portland this past weekend, where he was the top American finisher of him and Kurt Roberts. Roberts fouled twice and had his third throw was only 17.82 meters, not good enough to advance. Jones, on the other hand, gained the last qualifying spot for the second half of shot put competitions. I should back up. The way shot put works is everyone gets 3 attempts, and then the top whatever number, usually it's 8. In this case, it was 8, qualify for more attempts. Jones, on his last throw, moved up high enough and then held on as other throwers came in behind him and sat 8th after the first 3 throws, so he qualified for more. And he ultimately moved up to 5th and finished 5th in the world as at the Indoor World Championships. He was the top finishing American after being the 3rd top finishing American at the Indoor Championships. And it's really a strong, obviously, showing. I had some people ask me if this was the highest ever finish for a UB athlete at something like this, and I have to think that he is. Off the top of my head, the only other place where UB's really been competitive on a national level with its alums is track and field and is the shot put in particular. And I believe that Rob Golombek never finished above 6th or 7th in a U.S. championships or an Olympic trials. He was the record holder before John Jones. On the women's side, I think the same about Becky O'Brien, who was, I think, a little bit more of a weight throw and hammer throw person, but she was, she's UB's best ever thrower on the women's side. And so I'm pretty sure this is the best we've ever got. We have a track and field alum who's currently on the American bobsled team trying to make it for the 2018 Olympics, but that's obviously a ways off. We'll see what happens for that. But for now, John Jones finished 5th in the world. If top 8 in something is All-American, top 8 in the world, we could say all-world. John Jones, pretty exciting in the midst of a really exciting weekend in general. As far as I'm aware, I'm sure he'll compete in some other things between now and then, but the next really big thing is the U.S. Olympic trials in June, maybe July. Let's see what it says. July, first 10 days of July is the U.S. Olympic trials. So we'll see what comes of it then, and we'll only have kind of a month to prepare. In fact, that we'll see more names and some steeper competition at the Olympic trials than we did at the U.S. championships. Moving on, it doesn't help that I've got to just keep talking without John with me. Spring break was this week, of course, which meant that the diamond sports got a little bit more scheduling leeway to go with than they normally would. We saw softball play doubleheaders this whole week, 2 against the College of Charleston in South Carolina, 2 against South Carolina themselves, and then 2 at Savannah State down in Georgia. Those first 4 games didn't go so great. The Bulls were kind of unfortunate to lose the first one against Charleston 3-2 in 10 innings. I think the real big highlight there is Brianna Baker, who has already thrown a complete game, extra inning game in a 3-2 win over Princeton back at the end of February, again through all 10 innings. In a season where it's still a little bit hard to figure out what the pitching pecking order is, even who's the number 1 pitcher. Baker seems to have the highest highs right now, that she gets these long appearances and stays in it, keeps the game close. Second game against College of Charleston, offense kind of struggled. UB only scored a single run, lost 5-1. Against South Carolina, they lost 7-4 and 10-2. And I believe that first game they were leading 3-0 and then 3-1 until they gave up 6 runs in the bottom of the 6th. That's kind of a callback to what we've seen in the past. I talk about the storylines of this team from last year, and in general, they're better this year. The defense is better. The pitching is still being sorted out. The offense is a little more consistent, but they're still sometimes liable to give up lots of runs at once, and frequently that seems to happen late in games, and that definitely burned them in the first game against South Carolina. In the nightcap, they lost 10-2 in 5 innings. That's also something we're seeing this year. Whereas, a weekend or a couple games in a row go on, they start stronger and kind of pale off. And after that strong, they had a 3-1 lead against South Carolina, and they gave it up in the first game. It just kind of all fell apart in the second game. The good news is that they got a pair of wins, 6-3 and 9-0 against Savannah State on Friday, which is real exciting and solid. I have no idea how good or not good Savannah State is, but they did commit 7 errors across the 2 games. Even so, last year we rarely saw UB win by scores of 9-0 or even 6-3. Usually they won in higher scoring games by 1 or 2 runs. And so just the fact that they're winning in a more convincing style is really impressive. In both of these games, UB just got a ton of contributions from up and down the lineup. Really, so many that it's hard to pick out anything that's real solid and exciting, just because everyone got a couple hits. Most everyone got a couple runs here and there. In these wins, in the 6-3 win, Charlotte Miller came back from a bit of a rough performance against one of the South Carolina games and pitched 5 innings, gave up, which is fine because UB's defense has improved. But strikeouts are nice. They help out your defense, and there's less chance for something to go wrong if the ball's not getting put in play. In the second game, UB got a complete game shutout with only 8 base runners and against 8 strikeouts from Lace Smith. She's one of the rotating cast of freshman pitchers. She had, I think it's fair to say, the most outstanding pitching resume from her high school career of any of the freshman pitchers. And she's put together some good play. Like everyone, she's had some hiccups as well. But this against Savannah State, 7 innings, no earned runs, 7 hits, 8 strikeouts, was a real solid showing from her. I think since the last time we talked, it must have been since the last time we talked, Katie Weimer, freshman, was named MAC Player of the Week, which we talked about why last Sunday. She was something like 12 of 17 with 8 RBI in the weekend prior. She's now up to a .716 slugging percentage, which I think would be the highest in a couple of years since Trina Peel's first season. I don't have records pulled up right now, but I could believe that that's close to what Holly Luciano and Sammy Gallardo used to do a couple of years ago. She leads the Bulls with 30 hits, leads the Bulls with 6 home runs, leads the Bulls with 29 RBI, has 9 walks to 7 strikeouts. She does a little bit of everything offensively, and she leads the Bulls with 15 runs alongside Savannah Norcio, who's doing a heck of a great job from the top of the order there. And I think we'll continue to see Weimer move around in kind of the top of the order. We've seen her as high as 1, as low as 4 or 5. She just seems to produce wherever she is, but I wanted to call special attention there. And really, everyone in the lineup is a little more consistent than we saw from lineup last year. I mentioned Norcio. Ashton Ehrenhardt is another top of the lineup person who keeps producing. Danny Lalos keeps producing as well. I could list all the names and not really say anything super substantive, but they're on a winning streak. The 14-15 game losing streak is over, and it's now time for the long trips south are over. 2 days from now, they'll face Canisius at Canisius this Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So hopefully that'll be easy enough to tune in before evening obligations. And then MAC play starts this coming weekend. They host Toledo for 3 games, and then they keep playing. They have another midweek game against Canisius, and then they really get into the depth of MAC play with only some games against Binghamton and Niagara to break it up between now and the end of the season. So all the fun trips south, the broken down buses. If Matt Meyer ends up watching this, the broken down buses. Those days are over now for the season, and hopefully. I don't actually know what the weather is like in Buffalo right now, but hopefully the weather is a little bit better than last year, and hopefully the field holds up and they have a place to play. When we spoke last about baseball, their weekend series against Mount St. Mary's was set to extend into Monday, and so we hadn't yet wrapped it up that Monday game, and don't need to wrap it up any further. Since then, baseball lost 6-2 on Wednesday against Navy and had a 3-game series against Northeastern that really just broke a little unlucky for the Bulls. They lost 1-0 in a 12-inning pitching duel against the Huskies on Friday. They won 6-3 on Saturday in a game where I believe that was the game where Bobby Shepard went 5 for 5 from the leadoff spot, no less. UB had 10 hits and scored 6 runs, and Bobby Shepard had 5 of those hits, which is really impressive for the rest of the lineup. When you think about it, Shepard only scored 1 run. So the rest of the lineup found a way to score 5 runs on just 5 hits and 3 walks, which is a pretty solid, conversion rate, I guess I'll call it. In that first game, that 1-0 loss, UB actually out-hit Northeastern, but just couldn't get a guy across the plate. Alec Tui started the game, and he threw 7 innings with no earned runs, only 4 base runners in 7 innings. Logan Harasta matched him in 2 innings, and Mike Kalin came in and in his 3rd inning with 2 outs finally ended up giving up the winning run. Just a tough break there. They went up against Northeastern's pitcher, had 10 strikeouts in 9 innings in that game. In the final, rubber match game, I think UB's pitchers were pretty burnt out. They had used their normal day 3 starter, Brandon Muma, to gain the save in the 6-3 win, which Charlie Sobraski got the win. And so they pitched, they started Sean Dubin and brought in Weaver in the final game. And they lost 8-4 there. This was one where really the Northeastern offense, the other 2 were pretty evenly matched offensively. This is one where the Northeastern offense really outperformed the Bulls. They led 8-1 going into the 9th inning. They had 10 hits. UB gave them 3 extra errors to help them out. I'm noticing that Northeastern's home park says it's in Brookline, Mass. I wouldn't say that Northeastern's in Brookline, but whatever. Just a tough end to the weekend. A weekend that either team could have won that rubber match and deserved the series win, and just ended up being not UB's way. All 3 pitchers in this one gave up multiple earned runs on top of the 3 errors. At least one of Northeastern's runs scored on a wild pitch. Just it is what it is. In that game against Navy earlier in the week, that was one where you definitely saw UB unable to convert runners. Both Navy had 8 hits, Buffalo had 7, but Navy scored a few more runs in that one. There, Micah Brunzo was 2 for 4 with an RBI and a run. That's kind of the most outstanding line there. Dubin got the start with Muma as the long reliever in that game as well, and they combined to give up 6 runs. And Logan Harasta came in to pitch 3 innings of, looks like 3 perfect innings maybe, to give UB a chance, but they just couldn't get anything going in their final couple innings. So a 1-3 week for the baseball Bulls, which is not so fun, but definitely some things to look forward to there. That 1-0 loss in 12 innings, it's hard to get too upset about that. Heck of a pitching performance from the Bulls, and really they had 2 outs when the winning run came across. That one could have gone longer. They are also coming to Western New York, and finishing up that road-heavy travel everywhere part of their schedule. They're also playing at Canisius in the middle of the week. That's coming again on Tuesday. That's a 3:15 start. Tuesday's tomorrow. That's a 3:15 start, so that'll be getting going before the workday ends. And then they also play Toledo this coming weekend. They travel to play the Rockets, however. And so we'll have a wrap-up of those 4 games on next week's show, in which I will hopefully have John with me. Last but not least for UB is tennis. Both the men and the women got 2 matches in this weekend. The women have not yet started their MAC play. They are still on spring break. They were supposed to be in Puerto Rico, but they ended up moving to Florida because of concerns over the Zika virus. And they also had to shuffle their opponents around a little bit. They drew Division II Southern New Hampshire one day of the week, and that was a no contest, basically. They won 7-0. And really, as lopsided as you can get, all 3 of the doubles matches went UB's way. 6-2, 6-0, 6-0. It barely gets more lopsided than that. All 6 of the singles matches went in 2 sets. Only 2 of the sets were 6-4. Everything else was 6-0 or 6-1. Just a real no contest for the Bulls on Wednesday against Southern New Hampshire. They did go up against NJIT on Thursday, a little bit more competitive look. They did win the doubles point there that put them off on a good start. Nothing super exciting there. They took the doubles point. Tanya Stoyanovska and Diana Agasieva needed a tiebreaker to do it. They took that tiebreaker. I like seeing teams win in tiebreakers. those high pressure winner take all situations that, we ended up seeing men's tennis need and really be in last year in the MAC championship. Outside of there, Stoyanovska lost in the third set, go the distance match at first singles, but UB got wins at second singles, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So they're really showing off their depth there. And all those were pretty lopsided as well. Chantal Martinez Blanco won 6-1, 6-1. Margarita Kotak 6-0, 6-0. Sanjana Sudhir 6-0, 6-1. And Christine Haraldson 6-0, 6-1. Only Laura Holterbosch, in addition to Tanya Stoyanovska, lost there. So a pretty solid, spring break week for the women, especially given that their travel was up in the air and their opponents were a little bit up in the air until shortly before the week. They, I believe, are now ready to start MAC play this coming weekend. They'll host Toledo on Friday, and then they'll travel to Ypsilanti for Eastern Michigan on Sunday. Let me look up really quickly. I'll probably end up writing a preview for it anyway. But last year, they lost 5-2 against Toledo and won 5-2 against Eastern Michigan. So that's kind of our immediate comparison there. Men's tennis this weekend, not on spring break, but this weekend, they did already start conference play. They opened with, what I hate to ever admit a rivalry against a SUNY school, but after last year's MAC championship and after Binghamton joined the MAC, having won an inordinate number of America East tennis titles or Atlantic 10 tennis titles, probably America East, in the last couple of years, they left to join the MAC, in part because the MAC needed a sixth member. Binghamton's departure from their old conference was so significant, the conference just folded. They didn't even really have a reason to stay alive, but to keep putting Binghamton into the NCAA tournament. And I don't like Binghamton in the first place, so it was good to see UB get the win, if I can spoil a lead here. They jumped out to a pretty early 3-0 lead. They really ripped through the doubles matches and handled Binghamton pretty easily and got a 3-1 lead right off the bat. And it kind of fell the sets. And that 3-1 lead came all the way back to 3-3 for the Bearcats. It came down to Tony Miller at 6 singles. If you'll remember last year, Sergio Aravai, I don't know, I never know how to pronounce his name. I've got to ask someone. Sergio, had that comeback at, I believe, 5th singles to win the championship. This year, in the regular season, granted, it was 3-3, and all eyes were on Tony Miller at 6 singles, which was the only match to go 3 sets. And Tony had come back from being down a set. He lost the first set 7-6, ended up winning the second 6-2, and then really just ran through Frank Cote, or Cote perhaps, from Binghamton in that last set, winning 6-0. Obviously, that's real lopsided. He broke his opponent 3 times, broke his serve. That's the kind of, real satisfying. There's no nerves involved. All we can do for tennis is follow on Twitter most of the time. Just watching it come in 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. That's the kind of win you want over Binghamton. I speculated beforehand that Binghamton maybe didn't look as strong in the beginning of their season as we thought they might have been when the coaches poll came out and picked them 3rd in the conference. And 4-3 is closer than I would have liked, but considering they ran out to a 3-1 lead and it wasn't, they really handled them in doubles and they did enough to win in singles, and I'm happy with that. Last year, of course, they did the bare minimum that they needed to do to get into the MAC tournament, and they won the whole championship. The other team that they saw this weekend is not one that really has faded in the spring or looked a little lackluster. The one team picked in the preseason poll above UB, Western Michigan, has very quietly, while I had been focusing on basketball, pulled themselves up in the national rankings, which is concerning because there is really no team in the MAC that I like less than Binghamton, but I don't really like any of them, and so I don't wish them well. And Western Michigan wants to be nationally ranked. On Sunday playing, I think that Binghamton and Western matched up on Saturday, all of them in Buffalo, which was nice of the MAC to do. This one didn't go as well for UB. As badly as UB handled Binghamton in the doubles point, Western Michigan got them just as lopsidedly, winning 6-0 and 6-1 at 3 and 2 doubles to really take that point and get off on the right foot. And singles didn't really go all that much better. 3 matches went in just 2 sets, and the first 2 to finish were at 5 and 6 singles, and those both went against UB, and so UB was down 3-0 very quickly. Sergio did get a win at 3 singles to get back to within 3-1. Very similar, just tables are turned from the weekend against Binghamton, but UB couldn't come back to even to 3-3, to force a heads-up situation. Amar Hromich went down in 3 sets. He actually had won the first set, and so he gave up a come-from-behind win, and that was the clincher for Western Michigan. Akil Meza went down in 3 sets. He was trying to complete a come-from-behind win, and he went down 6-4. And then Pablo Alvarez played out a third set, and he had actually lost 7-5 in the first, and then won 6-3, 6-4 for the comeback. So not as bad as maybe 5-2 looks. You consider the doubles point was perhaps the ugliest looking one. UB did get wins at 2 and 3 and forced third sets at 1 and 4, which if one of those flip, it's as close as it can get. If 2 of those flip, it's a UB win. Ethan Nittolo and Tony Miller were the 2 to lose in straight sets, and Nittolo did go to a tiebreaker in his second set and could have forced a third. Obviously, that's a chain of ifs right there. We'll see. UB, I don't believe they beat any of their nationally ranked opponents this year, but they played Cornell to 4-3, and it looks like this wasn't too much. Let me double check that before I move past that sentence. Shucks. Sorry. They played Cornell to a 4-3 loss. That's right. They beat Brown. And this one wasn't that far from a 4-3 loss. I think Cornell was ranked higher at the time than Western is now. Again, not certain. We'll see what comes of this. UB's healthier in MAC play than they were last season at this time when they started the year 0-2. They're obviously 1-1. The MAC schedule is expanded this year from last year, and so they do draw Binghamton and Western Michigan twice. The good news is, if the bad news is they draw them twice, the good news is they draw them both at home twice. They'll play Toledo next weekend on Saturday, and then that's their only match before the rematch against Western Michigan. I think, after what they did to Binghamton, it was a 4-3 match, but it, was 3-1 from the get-go. Anything can happen. We saw UB fight back from a pretty big hole last season to win the championship, to compete for a championship. This year, with their senior experience, we're expecting them to compete for a championship. That match against Western Michigan is going to be a big barometer. It's still 20 days away, in 3 weeks. But I'm already looking ahead to that. This match against Toledo is not actually this coming weekend, but the next weekend after that. So they've got a weekend off to get healthy if anyone's dinged up. I noticed that Ethan Nittolo moved down to 5th singles this weekend. I don't know if that's due to injury or anything else. But it's worth noting that he moved down below Akil Meza after starting the season at 3, and Sergio had jumped him midway through the spring, and now he's down to 5. Could be a freshman thing, could be a number of things, but worth noting. We'll see. I think this match in 3 weeks against Western Michigan will be a big litmus test. In the meantime, UB needs to win against Toledo at home. They need to take advantage of a home schedule that gives them 5 home matches to only 2 on the road in the MAC. And we'll see what happens once, the MAC championships come around. For now, if they were going to go 1-1 on this weekend, I'm glad they beat. Thing I've got without John, I don't have much more to say. I hope that if he watches this, I've done wrestling justice. Looking ahead, this is, wrestling, swimming, and diving. Track and field has moved outdoors. That's the end of the winter sports, really. Even including the basketball teams, which we don't talk about on this show. Winter sports are over. We've got men's tennis, I mentioned, are off this coming weekend and then are on against Toledo the weekend after. Women's tennis is hosting Toledo and then traveling to Western Michigan this weekend, as I said. Softball is seeing Canisius and Toledo between now and the next show. Baseball is seeing Canisius and Toledo between now and the next show. And the only other sport that's in action in the spring is Rowing, which I've just caught rowing at the right time. They have the Murphy Cup in Camden, New Jersey this Saturday. So they've actually got a fuller spring schedule than I expected, which means either they added something or I just didn't remember. Either rowing Sunday, we'll see what's up with that. It's always a bit difficult to talk rowing just because I only vaguely know the sport and it's hard. I don't know. If they get in a boat and they race and they get a time and they don't race right next to each other, and we'll talk about them. Hopefully they have successes for us to talk about. But winter's over. We might end up going down to 45 minutes in general with these shows in the spring. We're going to start wrapping up. I know that Tim and some of the others are already looking ahead to football. It's spring football season. We do still have a couple months left here before the UB Athletics year is over. Last year, of course, that extended into mid-June when John Jones won the national championship, with so many of UB's track and field stars redshirting this year, whether for the Olympic trials or whatever reasons. I don't think we will be going into June, although Ryan Cribben right now looks like he could get a shot at nationals, and so maybe we will. With that, I'm Matt Gritzmacher. I am, once again, without John McWhinney. If you're a regular viewer, you know that anyway. If you're not, it's normally a little bit less Johnny One Note than this. I've got usually a straight man to bounce things off of and a fellow who can talk about wrestling more eloquently than I can. We do this usually every Sunday at 10. This week it was Monday at 10, in part because John was busy. And it's the Olympic Sports Roundup from ubbullrun.com. We'll see you next week. I hope you have a good one. Getting ready for Easter, getting warmer. It's all good things. Talk to you later.